Hi, I'm Allie with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to show you how to use jump rings today to make the Byzantine bracelet. The Byzantine bracelet is a set of 2 rings, 3 sets of 2. So Byzantine by, and that can help you to remember 2 sets of rings are used at once. And what we're going to do is we're going to be folding rings back and getting kind of a pattern to them. I'm going to start out by opening a bunch of my rings, and these here are aluminum rings. You want to make sure that the ring size is going to equate to what you're using. So jump ring projects, you want to make sure you have the right size of rings. For this, I'm using aluminum jump rings that are 4mm inner diameter, meaning the inside. They're an 18 gauge wire and 6mm on the outside. A lot of times I'm going to use 6.5mm outer diameter, 18 or 17 gauge in sterling silver. That's my favorite to use. So what I'm going to do is open a bunch of rings. I'm going to be using 2 sets of needle nose pliers. Some people prefer flat nose pliers. I have 2 rings that I'm actually closing. And to tell where I started and where I am going, I'm going to actually use a piece of wire. You can use a paper clip, you can use a twister seal, whatever works in order to keep your ends straight so that way you know where you've started. So I'm just going to take a piece of 20 gauge wire, and I'm using silver wire so you can see the end of it, and I'm using my gold rings. I'm just going to twist it around so I know what is the end. So I have my 2 rings onto my little silver wire there. Onto those 2 rings, I'm going to attach 2 more rings, both going through the original rings. I have my ring on. I'm going to put another one on, going through those 2 rings. So 2 into 2. You can also use this 2 and 2 pattern. It makes a really nice bracelet. You can do a 3 and 3 pattern with the same size of Byzantine ring. I actually have a bracelet that I wear a lot that is the 3 and 3 with just a sterling ring. Very easy pattern, very uncomplicated. So right now I have on 2 rings and then 2 more rings that are attached to those original 2. My third set of 2 is going to be 2 rings attached to the last 2 that I put in. So it's just 3 groups of 2 rings. When I close also, I forgot to mention earlier, I'm doing the opposite of when I open. So when I open the rings, I actually twist the rings to the side. I don't pull back on them, and I just kind of twist them back in place when I'm closing them. Now I have 3 sets of 2. I have my original 2 rings that are on my silver loop. I have 2 more that linked into those 2 rings, and then I have my last 2 rings that looped on to my second 2 rings. So again, my Byzantine is going to be sets of 2. 3 sets of 2 always is going to start your bend back section. I have these on. What I'm going to do is pick them up, and when I'm looking at them, I'm going to be working and linking on actually to my middle 2 beads. I'm going to take those first original 2 beads, or the last 2 rings that I put on, and I'm going to push them down to the sides of my rings. So they're actually going to sit on top and bottom of those 2 original rings that are linked on to my starter chain. So I bent the first 2 that are at the end. I bend them back, one to the left, one to the right, or one to top and bottom, depending on the way that you feel more comfortable holding it, and I hold them back. I then take the 2 rings that were in the middle, and I'm going to open those up, and what that's going to do is it's going to create a little channel for my rings to sit in. The 2 rings that I opened first, which were the last rings that I put on, they are going to form a little section that I'm going to need to grab into. So if you're having trouble seeing it, I'm going to just pick up an extra piece of wire right here and put it right in to the position where the wire needs to fit into. So my wire, my next 2 rings, are going to go into where my wire is. So you can see that Byzantine pattern starting already on the side. It's a V. And right where I put my wire is where I'm going to put my next 2 rings. So I'm going to demo this again and show you how to fold it back. So I'm going to pull my wire out, And the trickiest thing with this is, the concept is very easy. You have 6 rings on, you fold back 2, fold back the other 2, and put 2 more on. What is hard is getting those rings to fit in place. I'm going to link my ring on, close it up. One ring usually fits pretty easily into that space. My goal is to get that second ring in. I put that second ring in, spin around, and close it up. One thing that I think helps a lot with the Byzantine is you don't want to over open your rings. So when the rings come, they have just a little tiny slit in them that they're open. You don't want to open them too much on the initial open, or it does make it hard to fit in that section. So here go on my first 2 rings out of my 3 sets of 2. I'm going to put on 2 more rings, again, just like I did to the start. The next 2 that I'm putting on here are going to link into the last 2 that I put on. I'm going to close this up, link another one on, close that up. So then I have 2 that I use to hold after I bend it back, 2 more that go on, and then 2 more. So again, my 3 sets of 2 before I do any bending back. Jump ring classes and jump ring designs, I think the videos are one of the hardest to keep track of and the hardest to learn. If you are having trouble, step into one of our classes and we'll teach you how to do it at one of our locations. Close this up. And now I have on my 3 sets of 2 rings. So I have my initial rings that I'm not going to really be worrying about anymore because they're done. I've already bent them back. Now I have 2, 2, and 2. So I'm looking at these last 6 rings that are on. The last 2 rings that I put on, I'm just doing the same process again as I did with the first time. Those last 2 rings get bent, one back to the right, one back to the left, and push down. The 2 rings that are next get pushed, one up, one down, and that's going to create that little hole in there that I'm going to link my next jump rings into. When I do that, it's going to create that V pattern. That's the Byzantine pattern that you're creating. So when you're looking at this, you're going to just keep going. I'd add my next 2 rings, 2 more, 2 more, and then I'd start those bend backs again. And what you're eventually going to come up with, this one's kind of crazy colored, you're eventually going to come up with these V's where you're looking that they're facing at one another as you go along the bracelet. And as you switch to the opposite side, the V's are going to go next to one another in that direction as well. So that is the Byzantine bracelet. You can then attach a clasp to it just with a jump ring on the end. So I can have my rings here, and on the other side I can put a lobster and connect directly to it. I could also keep this and split it in the middle and connect rings with beads on them as well. So you can kind of play around with the design a little bit. You do need 12 rings to make a complete Byzantine look, to make that V section right here that you're just looking at between my fingers. So have fun. That's how you do the Byzantine. Number 1 rule, make sure you have the right size rings.